everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the DFR Down Under Show, presented by Daily Fantasy Rankings. Smatho 10 and the Big Hef are back for another episode of DFS AFL in Australia. Let's bring in my co-host for another bumper edition. Big Hef, how are you today, mate?
Very well, Smatho. We're filming during GWS Carlton, and to be honest, I couldn't turn that game off quick enough to come here and speak to you. What an awful team to watch they are, GWS. Just absolutely putrid, and let's hope the Blues can hang on.
Look, if you see their scores up to half-time this season where they kick only 1 or 2 goals, it's quite pathetic, isn't it?
Oh, it's just torture to watch. Unfortunately, we're getting a lot of these games this year, but every once in a while we get a good game that lifts our spirits. Let's hope that is tomorrow night, Brisbane-Collingwood.
Yeah, so we'll get on to Brisbane-Collingwood shortly. And as always, we are presented by dailyfantasyrankings.com.au, your source for AFL DFS here in Australia. But also, we are covering upcoming sports here on DFR, including next week, Hef. The NFL season is back. You must be quite happy to see that roll around for another season.
Yeah, wrapped. I can't keep up with it all, Smatho. NFL sort of goes by the wayside for me. Is it going to be another pod with Jay, or do we have to go back and listen to last year's?
I would say that we'll keep Jay into his goings on for this kind of season. If there is demand for the great man to come on the show, we'll certainly get him on. But yes, it's going to creep on because we've got no pre-season games at the moment to watch, so they're just going to get straight into it. Week 1 next Friday morning here in Australia. Well, what about the cricket though, Hef? We're over in England as well, and obviously there's some Draft Stars contests hopefully coming out next week. Well, Friday. I think the games are Friday, Saturday morning. So, what about the cricket, mate?
I love cricket in England. So, anytime there's cricket in England, I'm always excited to see what's going on. I won't promise that I'll be staying up and watching it all night, but I don't know what it is. We've mentioned this before. So there's a bit of movement in the air and off the seam. It's a real bat and ball challenge. It's a lot better than just watching the flat decks we have out here in Australia. So anytime there's cricket in England, yeah, bring it on.
Now, the final thing I'll touch on is it's September now. Usually it's finals time in the AFL. It's also mean it's spring carnival and the racing, mate. This is your wheelhouse. Obviously, you've been neck deep in research for the carnivals here in Melbourne and Sydney. How's that going along?
Yeah, really excited for the spring carnivals. It'll be good to see some of these DFS contests running for these big meetings. It's really just starting to warm up now. So exciting that it's been able to keep going for starters, the racing the whole time with all the virus stuff going on, and really looking forward to a big spring.
So maybe the next couple of episodes of the show we might be able to sneak in a couple of tips for you. So be prepared in the next couple of episodes of the Down Under Show so we can get some winners when we're playing Draft Stars Racing, which we probably get into once the footy dies down. All right, now let's get on to the show. Big thumbs up coming up because we weren't on till last Tuesday, so there's been a few slates since we last saw each other. So let me run through some nominations who could have been worthy for Smatho's 2 thumbs up, and I'll just run through a couple here. Starting on DraftKings, we had a couple here. Sports News Ireland is a name that I'm seeing quite often in the last couple of weeks, and he won a slate, or she, could have been she, you never know, the other day. Half decent, or was more than half decent, it won a slate. Brodie Ford, the superstar from Perth, the young gun, he got one as well. And then DFA's highly ranked member, I think he's number 6 now at the moment, Procession, actually got 2 wins over the past week, but unfortunately he doesn't get my thumbs up, which is
one thumb up for each.
No, a little shaky one there. Just keep at it, mate. You'll be right. Now on Draft Stars, plenty of DFR members getting wins as well, including a Body Cam Crush. He's a bit of a crusher at AFL. He won last Thursday. With Joey Danaher of all people going nuts. We didn't really tipped in too much. No,
I didn't find that. I noticed he wasn't sitting on the fence last week, like the other night.
Bullet on to Cam. Also one down to Muggs, who won with a single bullet last Friday. I love my single bullets, but unfortunately he doesn't get my thumbs up this week. And there was one called Audrey's Nan, which is one of the better usernames going around here. He or
one of
she.
The better ones, you reckon? Wow.
Audrey's Nan.
That could be a whole different demographic. Audrey's nan taking one home.
Imagine the
I
older.
hope she shared some with Audrey.
There's nothing like the older clientele winning on fantasy. It's like showing your old man how to do it and winning pools. It's nothing like it.
Yeah,
But my 2 thumbs up this week goes to another DFR member. His name is Pendle Swan. Now, the reason why he won my 2 thumbs up this week, because on Sunday, a little 2-game slate on Sunday, he stacked the Pies and the Blues match with 8 players, and then he ran the point home with Mason Wood of all players for the win. Mate, I'll bring up his side so you can have a look at it here. Look at this. So Mason Wood goes off for 64 to win by at least 20 points there. But Jamie Elliott, which we'll probably touch later on, was the key player in this particular slate.
Yeah, all of a sudden he's just gorging himself on those centre bounces, isn't he, Jamie Elliott? Did I see Liam Jones in another winning lineup?
No, this is in this winning lineup here. Yeah, 53.
That's the second time we've seen him in a winning lineup on the show this year. Yeah, he obviously did a bit better than what he's been doing against GWS. He just had a shocker over by the point post and gave up a goal. But it does prove that you can win with anyone in DFS, especially when we've got these single game and 2-game slates. But you did mention he's played the full 8-man stack in the Pies Blues game and come home with Mason Wood. That's contrarian. Let's put it that way.
I thought it just never works. You always thought about getting value, but
everything works sometimes.
Sometimes
60% of the time, it works every time.
Yeah, that's right. And that, as we mentioned, we are recording during the Giants and the Blues game at the moment, and at half time, at 3/4 time almost. So there's some shocking scores coming up. So there's not really, for the guys who stacked that first game, they're looking pretty on this Thursday night.
Yeah, the Blues just got a sneaky one there before 3/4 time, Smatho. So if we lose connection, I'll know what's happened. You've raced off to watch the last quarter.
All right, let's just race through this then. So Pendle Swan, bad luck to you the other night. I saw that you lost out on adjustments as well. So for you, you get 2 thumbs up for winning on Sunday and almost winning on Tuesday. Well done to you, mate.
And he beat Reich in that too. Like, how hard is that to do lately, beating Reich? So
yes. He's been on a tear. So that's why he got my thumbs up for winning this week. All right, let's move on with the show. And so we got the one game, which is a big blockbuster game here on Friday for us, which is Brisbane Lions at $1.45. They're going to be taking on Collingwood at the Gabba, which is a Brisbane home game. Currently, the spread's at 13.5, and the totals are around 119.5. As for the sites, DraftStars have put up a $60,000 single contest, and DraftKings have put up a $6,000 US contest. In team users, a couple of interesting changes today. 2 new debuts for each team. We've got Kieran Coleman for the Lions and Max Lynch for the Pies. Chris Mayne, who just got his face rearranged, he's out, along with Das and Cameron. Alex Witherden is a surprise, maybe not a surprise admission. He has been pretty poor in his time in the last couple of weeks. And Lincoln McCarthy is suspended. So that gives the Brisbane a little bit of firepower out of the side. Before I throw it to you, have 2 new guys. Coleman, he played in the NEFL last year, averaged around 67 fantasy points per game, some mediocre scoring, some ceiling scoring there. For Lynch, he's a ruckman, or tallish ruckman. He averaged 74 in his VFL scores last year. Before I get on to the game, Hef, I've got must plug dailyfantasyrankings.com.au's data tools, which shows that wherever you look on the points against tool, the Lions are very, very hard to score fantasy points against. So much so that in the last 5 matches, you can only get 2.8 players per game scoring over 80 fantasy points. Whereas you can target opposition backs against the Pies, lead the league in the top 3 backs at an average of 76 per player. So, Hef, what do you think of this particular matchup that's going to come up on Friday night?
Oh, that's a lot of info there, Smatho. When I saw that 2.8 players scoring 80, I immediately looked for Jared Blair, but he's not playing for Collingwood. So he would fit that 0.8 perfectly. Let's talk about these new guys. Kadian Coleman. So he's a He's a flashy half forward, good skills, good tackler, a lot of pace. Don't know how well that will translate to his fantasy output. We've talked about 70 in the NEFL being worth about 20.
Yes.
Obviously, minimum priced. He came through the Brisbane Academy, went pick 37. At least he's got pace, and if I'll touch on the game in a minute, but if Brisbane gets a hold of him, he's going to be in the right spot to be getting on the ball. And a couple of tackles and a couple of goals, and all of a sudden you've smashed value at 5K. So I'm not overly excited about Coleman, but I do think he's playable. Now, Max Lynch, when I saw they dropped Darcy Cameron, I thought, well, they got to get rid of some of these big blokes because it just looked ridiculous, all the big talls ruckman that Collingwood are playing. They brought in another ruckman. It seems very hard to me to play a ruckman with Grundy in the team, even at the 5K. So I don't think we're dealing with a couple of really relevant players here, but like we've said before, 5K, it's hard to make a really big mistake when you play them. Let's talk about this fixture we've got though, Smatho. Collingwood, when did they play? Sunday? Is that what we were just talking about?
Yes, they played on Sunday, played Carlton, yes.
Yep, so they've got a pretty quick turnaround there. Brisbane had the bye last week, so 12 days off for them. They were just cooling the jets. If Brisbane's fair dinkum, Brisbane are going to give Collingwood a walloping here. There's no Steele side bottom. There's no Treloar. There's no main train. He's off getting his eyeball put back in. They just seem so ripe for the picking here, Collingwood. And Brisbane, they've just got the home grand final booked in. If they're fair dinkum, they're going to give them an absolute hiding. That's my view of the match.
Yeah. And you're looking at the teams already. That's very inexperienced side for the Pies when you look at it.
Oh, it is. The one thing about these ins and outs is they are very like for like. Coleman comes in to replace McCarthy. Rich comes in to replace Witherden. The Pig Greenwood's in to replace Main, going to play that sort of dirty, no one knows what they're doing role. And although he did play through the midfield a couple of weeks ago, Greenwood, and on the bright side, he's not on the quick backup. He's had a bit of rest. So I think we'll find he's pretty playable later on. And then obviously Lynch to replace Cameron. Looks like he will be the second ruckman, I would assume, and they'll keep Cox anchored up in that forward 50.
Do you reckon... Oh, we'll get on the rucks and we'll talk about it now because the first question I want to ask you is, we saw what happened to Nick Naitanui the other night. They were just managing his time on the ground, resting him up forward, not really attending centre bounces.
Well, he was getting bashed. That probably didn't help him.
No, that probably didn't help him either. But do you reckon the Pies would have saw that and just go, okay, we need to give Grundy a bit more time around the ground but not in the ruck contests? That would be a fair summation because it's a pretty high price to pay for it, considering he's only going up against Oscar McInerney at 10,000.
Yeah, I was looking at who chopped. We saw Fullerton come in last game. Did he actually play any in the ruck? Because he got no hit-outs, and Oscar only played 75%. So there's 25% of the game where Brisbane just basically didn't have a ruckman. I know what you're saying there about Grundy. Like, they've got 3 ruckmen. You'd think they could give him a bit of a chop out, but I don't know. Natanui's quite a heavy ruckman with an injury history, and he's a bit more of a leaner specimen. So I don't necessarily think that they're going to be resting him. He has been out of sorts though, hasn't he? I don't know if he's been carrying a niggle or anything, but he's saying it's expensive. I don't know, 16,000 for Brodie Grundy. That seems pretty reasonable.
In saying that, at 16,000, you don't have Treloar or Sidebottom to worry about. So usually it's one of those premiums that you want to jam in. They're now gone. So, yeah, it's 16,000 where you could probably be, wouldn't say guaranteed, but 90 plus point upside in a matchup, which Brisbane are below average for fantasy scoring to the rucks, but Grundy's foolproof though, no matter who
we've
you
got to play one of them too. So Brisbane are hard to score against, but then so is Grundy. So Oscar at 10K, I think he's okay. But he seems to have this range of about 50 to about 70, and coming up against Grundy, you sort of lean that he's going to be more on the 50 end of the scale. 6 for Cox, 5 for Lynch. Like you're just taking a Hail Mary playing either of them, I think. So I can I can sort of make a case of playing any of them depending on what you've got left over from the rest of your build. So if you want to go with Grundy, there are cheap options up forward that you can fit him in. If you want to spend up a bit more and play McInerney instead, I don't think it's terrible. And if you want to pile into everyone else and play one of the big duds, then yeah, okay. How's that? My top pick's Grundy. I'll leave you with a top pick. I'm going to have faith in Grundy.
Yeah,
I think he can get 90 to 100, and yeah, I think that'll be good enough.
All right. Well, let's move on to the defence, and obviously the Pies are leaking in the league to opposition backs here for fantasy scoring. But with Witherden out, there's not really many standard options outside probably Daniel Rich, and probably just Daniel Rich is probably the one I'm keen at the moment. But could you just save yourself the trouble and just go back to the Pies instead with Crisps and Maynard, etc.?
Look, I don't really want to spend up on Pies against Brisbane. Brisbane are really stingy. Like Maynard at 13,500, he might find himself stuck with this role on Charlie Cameron as well. Brisbane's not a team that I want to be spending up on in positions like these. And Jack Crisp, he went huge last game against North Melbourne, which is looking worse and worse by the week. Scores against that side. Notice he's not getting any centre bounces. He's doing that all from the back half. I think that's probably going to have him quite popular coming off that big score, and I'm definitely not bullish at all on Crisp. If I'm going to play a Pie back, I want to go with Levi Greenwood just on that. He scored 54 in his only game so far. That was sorry, I got mixed up there with Crisp. That was against Carlton, not North Melbourne.
Yeah.
Greenwood got 54, 8K. He did seem to have a bit of time around the ball. Main had been playing that sort of role the last week or two before he was brutally murdered last week. So I think Greenwood's going to pretty much slot into that role, and 8,000, I think he's got a lot of upside there, and I don't think he's got much downside.
What about just above him at $8,510 is Isaac Quainer. He had a bit of his breakout game last week, let's be honest, versus Carlton. 84 fantasy points, bouncing off halfback. He was in everywhere, ground balls, marks, etc. 20 possessions, 5 marks, 5 tackles. I think the field should probably pile into him. Would you agree?
Definitely. Yeah, he's always had a bit of a spruik about him, Quainer, and until that game against Carlton, his top score for the year was 59, which is okay at this price tag, but yeah, I don't know. There's two ways you can look at it. You can say, he's finally coming good now that they've pieced his shin back together and sent him back out there. It's pretty gutsy to go out and score 84 your first game back after that gruesome injury. But do you instead think he reverts to what he'd been putting out earlier in the year? And even if he comes up with a 50, that's all right at his price tag. I'll be projecting to be more around the 50 to 55 marker against Brisbane, which is a whole different kettle of fish. But that's still a reasonable return of that salary.
Is he kind of
one guy who's going to be popular, I should say, is Ryan Lester. Because he fits the backs against Collingwood mould here, and he's coming off a pair of 70s, and you can still get him for under 8,000. So really limited footballer, Ryan Lester, which might be a bit harsh, but let's be honest. But
does his
he's
job well?
In reasonable form. He did have he had a 69 earlier in the year, a lot of 30s and 40s, so he's not a lock by any stretch of the imagination, but he's definitely worth playing in some lineups.
Oh man, someone's got to take over that Witherden role. That link out.
Well, that'll be Rich. Rich has had a pretty ordinary year, but there is a lot of 60-plus scores there, and a tick under 11,000, he can get you an 80 without stretching the friendship too much there, Rich. So that'd be a great return of that price. He's the guy you always come back to for Richmond when you're thinking who's the guy who's going to be getting the ball in the half back line. It's Daniel Rich, the first one you think of. He doesn't score as high as Witherden, but on the flip side, everyone knows that. So maybe he's overowned. I don't know.
It's actually turned out to be a bit of a tricky position because you've still got Noble in there at the same price at 10.880. He's been
He's
playing
really
well.
consistent, isn't he? Noble.
Yeah, and then you got Birchall at 9.8. You know, he's always been that half back. It's probably a make and break, the defence. So
yeah, I think definitely for Brisbane, they're all playable. You just try to land on that combo if the data comes through, and especially if you think Brisbane's going to be too good for Collingwood, they might dominate the ball out of the back half. The other side of it is Collingwood, if they're out of legs, maybe they do slow the game down a lot. And then you get your guys like Crisp just loading up from the back half. There's always two ways to look at it, Smatho, and I do very well at confusing everyone every week.
50 cents each way. I love it. All right, let's move on to the mids. And Lachie Neale, he's wrapped up the Brownlow just about, but didn't play his best game last week for 71 against the Saints. But if you look at if his box scores last week, you know, only Zorko managed to get 81. That was the highest out of that midfield group. So what do you think about the Lions here in this particular matchup with Paz?
They've been pretty stingy this year, the Saints. So I don't think that's his true level, Lachie Neale. Obviously, before that, we had 4 tons out of 5 games. 18,000 it's such a big price to get your head around. But I wouldn't say don't play Lachie Neale. Collingwood don't hold any fears for me playing the proper midfielders against them either, because they just go head to head. In the past, Greenwood has done some roles. I don't think he's going to do it here. So they're all in play. Lyons is a guy who tends to be a little bit under-owned, especially when he's at 16k and people see 18k for Neale. They go, I'll go for Neale. But you don't write off Lyons. He's definitely got almost as big a ceiling as Neale, and he does give you that little price saving. But when you go to the other side, there's really not much in terms of cheaper options through the midfield here, is there?
I'm looking at it now. We've got the new guy in Coleman, and then Tyler Brown at 6.2, which is no confidence at all. And then Mitch Robertson finds himself down here at 9,200, which you won't find many people playing him at that form at 36 in these last 5 games. That's no good down here.
Yeah, the thing about Tyler Brown is he did have some centre bounce attendances last game. Didn't overly capitalise on it. He only had 39. And then you do have Greenwood coming back in, who attended some himself when he played the previous game. So, that might reduce Brown's appearances there in the centre bounces.
All right, let's look at other options, including for the Pies with no Treloar or Sidebottom. So that kind of leaves Adams all these Lowsome with Scott Pendlebury. And then you have to look at who's that third person in the CBAs. And they've been rotating a few people, but the one that comes up in majority of CBAs at the moment is Jamie Elliott, and he is now midfield available at 10,620. What do you think?
And he's obviously a really viable option at that price, coming off 100. But even before then, he had 4 consecutive scores of 50 or higher. So that's a pretty good floor at that price. He's obviously getting all the time he wants in the middle of the ground. He does everything, a bit of everything. He's a good mark. He tackles. Yeah, he's going to be really popular, Elliott, and probably for good reason. He does have injury worries. So if you do want to fade Elliott, you always have the chance that he's going to hurt something and go off. But, he does seem reasonable chalk in this, doesn't he?
Are you worried about the actual matchup against the Lions, though, curbing his output?
Yeah, I am. But someone's got to score, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're looking at it, Adams is going to be in there. Pendlebury is going to be in there. Brisbane don't generally give up a lot of points in sort of uncontested. I was looking through the data tools, actually, and trying to work out these contested and uncontested splits. And the only real push I could get for was Collingwood allowing a lot of uncontested ball. Well, not a lot, but in comparison, both teams are very good at restricting contested ball. Brisbane also good at restricting uncontested ball, and Collingwood were leaking some uncontested ball, if anything. But Then you look at the Brisbane side, and they were near bottom of the table for actually getting uncontested possessions. So, it's there wasn't a whole lot to go through from the data. I'm almost just leaning Brisbane stacks because I think they'll have the fresh legs. And you do have plenty of options through the middle here. Even Zach Bailey, 12,000 seems a lot for him, but we've seen a good ceiling from him. And that might just scare off a few people, that 12,000 price tag.
Yes, yeah. I would have loved Zach Bailey to be a little bit cheaper than 12.2. But
like if he was 10, everyone would just be piling into him. But in reality, he can get you 80, 90, and that's still good at 12K.
All right, let's move on to the to the forwards. Sorry, and I'm a bit concerned with no McCarthy up in the forward line, which means more focus on Charlie Cameron in terms of goal scoring, along with the tall bloke Hipwood. So having McCarthy out there, I do have concerns of having a high scoring game for the Lions. I might think they just grind it out. So we kind of already locked in Elliott. Most people will play Elliott in their forwards lines. Is there anyone you want to pair him up with, or anyone that sticks out here in the forward line?
They will, but if you're trying to save money, you're probably going to need to, especially if you want to play Grundy and you want to play Neil, then you're going to have to go with two cheaper guys here in the forward line, and then you might want to save money through your midfield using Elliott there. So just sort of looking at Hipwood's obviously in really good form. He's quite erratic as a footballer, but he's got a bit of a ceiling there at 9,000. He can get you a 70. Collingwood are generally quite reasonable at restricting his type of player. I think Cameron's the guy who's going to get obvious attention. He probably gets Maynard, who's been in super form this year. So a guy I think that might get under the radar a bit is Cam Rayner. He missed a few weeks, came back with only 40 last week. But just before he went out of the side, he was starting to build some pretty good form. He had a 4-week block there with 3 scores over 64. So at 9.5K, and especially if Brisbane get a hold of him, I'm really happy playing Cam Rayner, actually.
Any cheaper options such as McStay, Josh Thomas, Callum Brown that you probably want to plug in to afford the bigger guys?
Look, I don't know much about Tom Fullerton. I'm impressed that he had 40 at that 5K price tag without getting any hit-outs. I assume he's the guy that's going to chop out with McInerney. If I'm wrong, I'm probably going to look a bit silly, but can you help me out there, Smatho?
No, I looked at his stat. No hit-outs last week. So that 40 was purely without hit-outs. I just can't see who is the second ruckman here. So
I assume it'd be him or McStay maybe, but I assume it's Fullerton. I don't care if he's not getting hit-outs, but if he is getting around the ground, he's got that game under his belt. Just learn what it's all about. He stayed in the side. Maybe he's the best 5K option while everyone's focusing on the new guys coming in. Maybe he's the better guy to trade down to. Interesting from the data tools, actually, that Brisbane actually give more points up to forwards than Collingwood do. So you can make a case for Josh Thomas, who was really good last game. Callum Brown always seems to bob up every now and then, but I think the majority of my teams will be based around this Brisbane narrative that I've got, that they've got the legs. And obviously you can play Zorko forward. It's the type of game that if there's a carcass, Zorko will be munching into it, won't he?
So it sounds like the theme that you are pretty keen on Brisbane stacks / Brisbane narrative. They're going to get hold of them here.
I am. I think there's a few Collingwood guys with opportunity, namely Elliott and Greenwood and Grundy's obviously the gun, and Pendlebury and Adams are pretty quality. But I think on the base of probabilities, I'm going to have a very heavy exposure to Brisbane in this game.
All right, so make sure you get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for our preview from Jesse Penfold. He's going to be back with his preview, plus the links to our cheat sheets data tools. They also have the lineup builder for DraftStar, so you can make those quick lineups or use your own projections and build up your teams from there. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel anytime for future content from here at the Down Under Show. All right, Hef, we'll wrap it up here for tonight's show or today's show. Is there any quick final thoughts before we close it out?
Don't look at the footy, Smello. That'd be my final thoughts for you.
Oh, I should look at it. I can see $0 winning in my fiver, so that's not great. Oh, the Giants are in
The
front.
Giants have run all over the top of them.
Wow, well, let's have a quick look at the scores. Yeah, look, Toby Green is the highest one at 79. Yeah, so whoever stacked that first game, which we all know who. Yeah, well done to them. So stacking works sometimes. You never know. All right,
Absolutely.
we'll wrap it up. Thanks for your time there, Hef.
No worries, anytime. Maybe we can talk about a team other than Collingwood next time, Smatho.
Oh, we'll look at the fixture and see how we go. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, mate. Good on you.